Got an echo. So last week, Romans 12. Week before that, Romans 12, right? Congratulations. Yeah. So we're doing an argumentation study in the book of Romans. And if you remember last week, we were talking about, well, I was doing mainly most of the talking, right? I was talking about grace and how it has to do with our perspective and seeing the potential of the things that exist around us. And Paul, he kind of expands into that a little bit. You know, he says, look, we're all members of one another. We're not in an individualistic culture. We've been invited into a culture where we're all members of one body, and every member serves the other member for the common good of the body. It's like that we have this argument nowadays that either you're an individualist, you know, independent, freedom-loving, American, barbecuing, you know, or you're like a socialist and you care about everybody else. And usually when people take the extreme stance one way and the extreme stance the other way, is somewhere in the middle is the correct way. When Paul says that we are in one body, and this is verse 5, he says, so we, though many, are one body in Christ, and individually members of one another. So we have individuality. I mean, come on. I'm the guy who usually wears Converse All-Stars up here and wears, you know, come on, who does that? We're all individuals, but we serve each other's common interest, okay? And that's what he's talking about. He's going to expand on that a little bit in the next line of argumentation where he closes out this idea of what living sacrifice really is and what it looks like. Because that's one of the things about this chapter is people take this out of context and they make it into whatever they want to. But the lead up to this, if you remember, is Paul talking about how he cares so much for his brothers and sisters that he would give up everything that he had for them. Right? We know somebody else like that, don't we? Ah, good. That's way out of the bag. Thank you, Charlie. Good. Because what did Jesus do? I mean, it's way out of left field because we all expected, you know, what do you expect when the king walks into town? Trumpets blaring, you know, the road show. I mean, you see the president come into town. Does he ride on a donkey ever? You ever seen that happen? Or what about, I mean, the modern equivalent would be like him riding into town in a Yugo Escova or something, a Ford Fiesta, right? Anyone ever see the president ride around in one of those? No, it's unexpected, and it's way out of left field. So, yeah, I'm trying to lead up to this. Grace is this ability. In the next verse, he says, having gifts that differ according to the grace given to us, let us use them. Okay, and then he goes into the list of the different gifts that he thinks are important to mention right now. And I said 2 of the gifts are different than the others, if you guys remember that. But grace, we oftentimes think that grace has to do with something completely different. But grace in its essence is the ability to see the potential in someone else. So he's talking to this congregation, right? Okay, let me just set the atmosphere of the people that are in this congregation. He says, there's this group of people who are brand new. This happens in every church, by the way. There's this group of people who are brand new. Maybe they don't show up all the time. Who knows, right? And then you got this group over here that they show up on a, you know, they show up. They do the stuff that they're supposed to do. They're just learning though, still. And then you got this group who comes all the time, right? I'm trying to divide the room. I'm not just dividing the Roman church at the time. And you have these people who've been sitting here for so long that it's just part of what they do. You know, they've maybe forgotten. Or maybe they've started to value the wrong things. So as Paul's speaking to these 3 different groups, you got to put yourself in the seat of how those people would hear the things that Paul has to say. Because this whole book is about righteousness. And then what is that? It's living in right relationship, right? It doesn't. We automatically attach righteousness to God Because we know God's the only one who's righteous. Because I know myself. I look at that guy in the mirror all the time. There's promises I've made that I haven't kept. God's kept every promise. I can't out-righteous God. Okay? But righteousness has to do with the relationships of the people around us, the people we care about, the people we work with, maybe our neighbors. The promises that we make and we keep or we break are what determines the relationship or our righteous status with other people. So when he's talking about this, we're each individuals and members of one another. It means that the church body is one body. And Paul wrestles with this through every letter that he writes. Did you guys know that? That's one of the things that Paul wrestles with more than anything else. It's through this dissection that happens within the church. Because people say, well, that group of people, they don't do this, or they don't do that. They don't eat meat, or they do eat meat, right? There's that big argument, right? They have that big argument. Let the one who has little faith. Paul has all these things where he's talking to these different churches, and it's all where they divide themselves based on gender lines, based on all these different kind of lines. When we enter into this room, we are part of one body. That's what he says. Each individual comes into the room, and we're part of one body. There's no other place that happens. If you go to a concert, I don't care what kind of concert it is, the moment you step into that room, you immediately become part of the audience. You're not an individual anymore, not to the guy who's up on stage. And to the guy who's up on stage, he's the only individual that's in the room, or the people that are in the group. The rest of them have become the audience. When we enter into church, we maintain our individuality, yet each individual serves the other's greater good. See how he's framing? He's framing. I'm trying to reframe. So he talks about generosity, prophecy, teaching, leading. He talks about all these characteristics. He uses 4 specific characteristics: service, teaching, prophecy, leading, and exhortation. I'm sorry, 5 attributes he talks about. Each one feeds the other. And he does this several different ways. He uses different words, different times. But Paul talks about how we're all here to serve each other, because that's what brings us together. So, without further ado, I'm going to read verse 9 through the end of the chapter into chapter 13. And then we'll go back and talk about it. All right? You guys ready? Strapped in, buckled up, framed correctly, I hope. Let love be genuine. Abhor what is evil, and hold fast to what is good. Love one another with brotherly affection. Outdo one another in showing honor. Do not be slothful in zeal. Be fervent in spirit. Serve the Lord. Rejoice in hope. Be patient in tribulation. Be constant in prayer. Contribute to the needs of the saints and seek to show hospitality. Bless those who persecute you, and do not curse them. Rejoice with those who rejoice. Weep with those who weep. Live in harmony with one another. Do not be haughty, but associate with the lowly. Never be wise in your own sight. Repay no one evil for evil, but give thought to do what is honorable in the sight of all. If possible, so far as it depends on you, live peaceably with all. Beloved, never avenge yourselves, but leave it to the wrath of God. For it is written, vengeance is mine. I will repay, says the Lord. To the contrary, if your enemy is hungry, feed him. If he is thirsty, give him something to drink. For by doing so, you will heap burning coals on his head. Do not be overcome by evil, but overcome evil with good. Amen. Right? So Paul is really awesome with his words. I don't know if you guys notice how much Paul contrasts in this. How much he contrasts. He says, don't be lazy and don't be right? Or do be this and don't be that. That's what we all want. We all want to hear that, right? Because it makes life easier if I got a list of things to follow, doesn't it? That was a trick. It's not. It's not easier to live life if you've got a list to follow. Ask the Hebrews. They had a list. How well did they follow that? When you start thinking of yourself and you go, oh, well, I'm not haughty. I'm never arrogant. I never do that. Look at, like Moses. One of the funniest things in the Bible is where Moses goes, I am the most humble guy in the world. Do you guys realize how funny that is? It's so funny. It's hilarious to me. Let me tell a joke so I can explain how comedy works, right? If anybody doesn't know, you've probably heard jokes your whole life, but I don't know if you know how comedy works, so just bear with me if you do. Okay, so there's this old woman, and she is a widow, and she lives in a duplex. And a young associate professor moves next door. Okay, you guys may have heard this joke before, but you can laugh if you heard it. Associate professor moves in next door, and this widow, every morning she wakes up, she goes out, and she prays. She says, Father, thank you for giving me one more day. I thank you for everything that you've given me. Father, you're the greatest. That's what she prays every day. And then at lunchtime, guess what? Same prayer. In the evening, as the sun's going down, guess what she does? She gets out on her porch and she says it again. Well, this associate professor, he's in the humanities. And I don't know if you guys know how a humanities professor is, but they study things like Nietzsche, Marx, Freud. God is the last thing on their mind. Most of them are all atheists. And those are the people who are teaching your kids in college. But every day, he sees her do this. Morning, noon, and night. Because of how much an associate professor works, right? He sees her do this every morning, noon, and night. And it starts bugging him. It starts bothering him. And he's thinking of ways that he can get back at her. So one day when she goes out to pray, he starts telling her that there is no God, God is dead. That's what he does, his little prayer, right? She goes out and prays. He goes out and says, there is no God, God is dead. And he does it over and over. As religiously as she does her prayers, he does his taunt. One day she gets out on the front porch and she says, Father, my check did not come in. I don't have any groceries. I'm at the end of my rope. I don't know what to do. The associate professor hears her. This time he doesn't taunt her. This time he's got a plan. So the associate professor goes to the grocery store and he spends every penny he has on groceries, buys as much stuff, fills his car completely up. And he waits till the next morning, and in the middle of the night, he takes all those groceries and he puts them on her front porch. When she comes out to her front porch, she goes to pray, but she's stopped by this heap of groceries that's in her front porch. There's this pile of food, just abundant food. She can barely even open the door. She stops, she gets out there, and she starts to pray, and she goes, Father, you've answered my prayer. And the associate professor jumps out of the bushes, and he says, I told you there was no God, that God is dead. I bought those groceries. So the widow stops. She says, oh, okay. She says, God, not only have you provided for my need, how gracious you are that you could see the potential of this situation, that you didn't just get me groceries, you made the devil pay for them. Right? Okay. So now I'm going to explain how a joke works. Okay? Joke works simply. It's very simple. What you do in a joke is you get everybody to start thinking the same thing and moving in the same direction. Everyone starts having prior assumptions, presuppositions, and they start moving in one direction. And then all of a sudden you turn and you flip the story around to where now the one who was is now the one who wasn't. Okay, that's the basic, for every joke that you've ever heard in your entire life, that's the basic premise of the joke. That's how they start. So now think about this. As we're about to go through this argument that he makes. The way that our lives have been, and this is not original to me. I heard this on a TED Talk from Michael Jr., so if you get a chance, YouTube Michael Jr., he's a comedian, a Christian comedian, and he has a TED Talk. But in it, he does a big, long set. I don't have time to do a big, long set because I got to get through this chapter in Romans. But in your life, in your own life, you've spent your entire life trying to get people to go the direction you want them to go, to serve you and what you think is best. And the big joke about life is the day you realize that the story is not about you, that it's about somebody else. Because that's what love really is when you turn the story around and you actually make it into something that can be better than the person you thought you were. So with that said, I'm going to move into the first line here. Okay, now just keep that in the back of your mind. Put that in your Rolodex. We're going to jump back on the trail of what Paul's talking about. And I'm going to link these two ideas together. Because he says, let love be genuine, abhor what is evil, and hold fast to what is good. That's two sentences in your Bible. In Greek, guess what? It's one sentence. Okay? There's no periods in Greek. It's one idea, one movement. Because we say, let love be genuine. And I'll just stop right there. Full pause. Because some of you have a different word in your Bible. I know that a lot of you are old King James readers, and I read from the English Standard Version. What word do you have? Dissimulation. Okay, now, do you know what that word means? Good. Well, you know what I tell you guys all the time? If you find multiple translations where one word is translated several different ways, right? There's like 10 different translations, have 10 different words in this spot. Okay? So I had to go and find the Greek. You know, I was talking with my dad at 4:30 this morning, and then I had to get with my earthly dad because I left my cell phone at his house because this word just, it was like penetrating me. I had to find out what it meant. You know, you ever done that? Like I have no idea. I have to find it. And you start digging, and you dig into the Greek, and then you dig into the alpha pretext, and you guys do that stuff? Okay, so what's really interesting about this word, I'm going to give you the word in Greek. So just bear with me. This is that Bible geek stuff that I talk about. But there's something underneath it. Anupokritos. So if you were to say it, anupokritos. Anupokritos. Class? Anupokritos. Okay? So, now I'm going to give you the explanation of the word. The anu in anupokritos means not. Now, can you guys think of the second part? It's two words that have been smashed together. We do that in English too. Two words have been smashed together, and they take the first part of one word, which is a. Anytime you add a to something in Greek, it becomes a negative. Okay? And pokritos is the other word. Now, can you think of a word in English that sounds pretty familiar to pokritos? Hypocrite. Yeah, hypocrisy. Good. I'm getting you guys to think. I'm getting them wheels turning, I hope. So, engagement. It's great. So what it really means is without hypocrisy. Okay? Let love be what? Without hypocrisy. Okay? Now, you're going to say, okay, so that means the same thing, right? Well, not really. Because what do you think of when you think of hypocrite? Somebody who does one thing and says something else, right? And, we got a world full of those. But that's not what hypocrite means in Greek. Do you know that? Hypocrite literally means, right? So this is the part where I'm digging through the Greek New Testament, and I'm digging through concordance, and I'm digging through other parts like Socrates and Plato to find out how they use the word in order to find out what it means. The most common usage of the word, pokritos, in Greek was an actor. Somebody who acted. Okay? Now, let me ask this question. Does an actor say and do the same thing? Well, you ever watch, let me give out some examples. In Mission Impossible, okay, I know Tom Cruise is a terrible, I don't know why that one just popped up in my head. Who's seen Mission Impossible, the movie? Okay, let me find one. Okay, that's the best one I know. Mission Impossible, the movie. When Tom Cruise is acting like the character that he plays, how much work do you think he put into becoming that person? A lot. He put a lot of work into it. Studied. He did everything that he was supposed to do to mimic the behaviorism. Let me think of another one, like something, the guy who, anyone see the Johnny Cash film, Walk the Line? Yeah, Walk the Line. Okay, if you haven't seen it, it's pretty good. In it, the guy who studied to be Johnny Cash, I cannot remember his name. I think it was Joaquin Phoenix. Somebody can correct me if I'm wrong there. But the guy who played Joaquin Phoenix, the actor, or in Greek, hypocrite, the hypocrite who played Joaquin Phoenix, studied for 2 years. Did you know that? Watched everything he could about Johnny Cash. And then when you watch the movie, he's believable as Johnny Cash. He picks up all of his mannerisms. If you were to watch any video of Johnny Cash from any time period, because he plays the full lifeline of Johnny Cash, you watch any video, he picks up every mannerism of Johnny Cash. You know, the little twitches, little twitch things he does and all that. Picks up the accent, everything. He does an excellent job. It's called method acting in our modern context. Now, with that said, the difference, what a hypocrite really is someone who acts, okay? It's not someone who says something and does something completely different. That's another monster altogether in Greek. There is another Greek word for that. It's apokritos is the one we're going to focus on today. I feel myself getting pulled off the trail here. But when he says, let love be genuine without hypocrisy, but he's actually saying, let love be without hypocrisy. He's saying, let love be natural. Don't be an actor. Don't pretend. Now, okay, this one is going to be difficult for me because coming through this and working through this morning, especially this morning, there are things in my life that I pretend to love. You know that? There's things in your life that you pretend to love. You don't want to admit it in the conversations you have with Dad, but there's things that you do, mannerisms you have, things that you do for the people around you that you don't love at all. But where is your love actually coming from is the question. Because are you acting that you love the thing that you're doing, or are you loving the person that you're doing it for? Because that's where genuine love comes from. Because you can't love an object, okay? You guys know that. I hope you know that I can't love pizza the same way I love my wife. I can't love the goats that I got the same as I love my wife. Love, clearly, we've gotten love all mixed up in our society. You guys get me here? Okay, I'm just hammer this point a little bit more. Because apokritos, it could mean genuine, could mean unfringed, it could mean those things, but it's translated so many different times, so many different ways, that I think that we don't have an equivalent in English. And I could say it 1,000 times. But the real exercise is to ask yourself the question, do I really love this? And if I don't, why not? We don't want to ask those questions because it's more comfortable to be in the place that we always are. But if we're always in the place that we've always been, how could we be anything more than we currently are? If you've always done the things that you've always known, then you are doing the opposite of what grace is. Because grace has to do with potential, doesn't it? And I think that's why Paul specifically uses this word. Because he could say, let's say, he doesn't, but he could say, let love be, what's another word? True. But he doesn't say that, does he? He says, let it be without acting. Is there someone that you don't like, but you act like you love them? And why do you act like you love them? Because you're not willing to sacrifice anything for them. And if you start asking those questions, you're going to find more about yourself than you care to want to know. Because you're actually starting to till the garden. Anyone who's ever tilled a garden before, is that an easy task or a hard task? It's hard. And it hurts sometimes. I get calluses on my hands from tilling for years. I don't till anymore, but I know the work. The work is hard. And for us to develop as people and recognize the people we're supposed to be, what do we have to do? We have to do some work, right? It's that uncomfortable work. It's that genuine work that we have to do. Because there's things that you don't like, and you just stuff them away. You think that you can put them in a dark place inside of you and not let it out, but it will kill you. It will. Or God will bring it out, and you won't want to hear it, and you'll be like Jonah sleeping in the bottom of a boat, running away all the time. Because genuine love is the only love that there is. Unhypocritical love is the only love there is. I could say that I love watching TV, or I could say that I love my couch, but that doesn't make it true or genuine. I could act like I love my couch. I could act like I love my neighbor and not actually love them at all. Is that a flaw with my neighbor or my inability to get in touch with my God? So the genuineness of love. Now, he uses that as the point, as the pointy part of the stick when he talks about the talents that we have. Do you realize that? He says, let your love be genuine. So, hey, guess what? If you don't feel like you're a generous person and you don't love doing that, ask yourself why. Maybe there's another route. Maybe you should be a teacher. But teachers can be generous through their teaching. The thing is, most of us try to cover up our skills and our talents with things that we think that we're supposed to be. But I guarantee you, some of you are meant to be encouragers. Some of you are meant to have a unique perspective that only God has on the world around you. Some of you are meant to be leaders. Some of you are meant to be generous, and some of you are meant to serve. Of those, which is the most important? Like the question they asked Jesus, right? I got to take my jacket off. Like the question they asked Jesus, who's the most important in the kingdom, Jesus? You guys know, who's the most important? Can you tell me? The one who serves. Now, do teachers serve? It's interesting. What about prophets? Do they serve? They're always given something, aren't they? Most of the time you don't like it. You don't want to hear it. Right? Because it forces you to start tilling that garden. Because you can't plant seeds until you have good soil. Does that bring a parable to anybody's mind? It should. So, let your love be genuine. Now, what does that look like, Paul? I'm so glad you asked, Paul says. He says, abhor what is evil and hold fast to what is good. Now, we all know that my perspective has been broken by the world. I know that. I know that when I say, oh, that's a good thing. Ice cream, right? Let me use ice cream as an example. I say, oh, butter pecan ice cream is my favorite. It's the best. No one else, no other ice cream even comes close. Now that's good to me, but is it? If I just sit and eat tubs of butter pecan ice cream? My perspective is clearly broken. I have to look to someone else's perspective for what is good and what is bad. Because he says it right here. Abhor, hate what is evil. You guys have hate. What is evil? I think is that the King James? Abhor, yeah, okay, abhor. It's like basically saying, ooh, no, I'm not getting close to that, right? That's to abhor. Our words have become so watered down in modern English that I think that we just throw them around freely and we forget the value of the words that we have, because you can encourage somebody. How do you encourage somebody? With words. What is it? And Paul's going to move into that here in a second. Because he doesn't diminish generosity or prophecy or leading or teaching. He doesn't diminish any of those. He says mercy, right? You do acts of mercy. He says, love one another with brotherly affection. Now, this is really neat in the Greek, okay? So you have two words in Greek. You guys do realize that there's multiple words for love in Greek. We often translate them all as love, right? We often translate them all as love. This, in my translation, I don't know if it's the same in yours. I didn't have a whole lot of time to look up the King James translation. But this one is really interesting because he says agape su, philemo. Okay, I'm working on my Greek. It's not the best, but it's not the worst either. So I'm still working on it. But it's 3 words there, right? And how many words do you have in English? 6? So it takes us more words to describe something that only takes them 1. Now, agape, right? You guys have heard agape before. I hope that you've heard agape before. If you haven't heard agape before, agape is referred to a lot of times as godly love. That's how we refer to it. But there's something underneath that, because what is godly love? You can ask that question. If you want to really know something, ask why or what 5 times, and you'll get to the root of whatever it is. So when you ask the question, what is godly love? Well, sacrificial, unconditional. Where? Love someone to the end of yourself, because that's the only way that you can find yourself. That's what real love is. It's not acting, is it? It's not acting. It doesn't matter how much I study, how much I do the things. Now, if you think about another example here, and I know I keep going on and on about this love thing, right? What kind of guy is this getting up here in church and just talking about love over and over again? Well, Paul and John both do it, because it's the thing that unites us and binds us. And if we don't have a tight grasp on it, we don't know anything. We don't know anything. So, when you first met your wife, for those of you that are married or been married, when you first met your wife, what did you do? You studied, right? You studied everything that she did, her mannerisms, just a lot like an actor would. A lot like an actor would. Right? And this is from a man's perspective, because I'm not a woman, okay? Gender is a real thing, okay, guys? Gender is a real thing. I'm a man, and a man has a unique perspective on this, and I'm going to give you my unique perspective. And some would say it was prophetic, okay? So, when I first met my wife, I studied everything that she did before she was my wife. I knew the way that she did her hair. I knew the way she liked to do her fingernails. I knew what kind of car she drove, what kind of gas it took, what kind of oil it took, how to change the tires on that car. I studied everything, what kind of music she liked, what kind of dresses she liked to wear, what her favorite colors were. I was a student of my wife. Does that mean that I loved her? I was acting, wasn't I? It's like Joaquin Phoenix. He walked the line, right? My Johnny Cash accent isn't very good. But just like Joaquin Phoenix when he walked the line. Now, when my wife got into trouble and I had to get her out of trouble, when I had to pay for something that she had done, when I realized how far I was willing to go for her, do you think that's the moment I loved my wife? Absolutely. Because you don't really know. Some of you have been married for a long time. 18 years, right? Like 18 minutes underwater. That's a joke I always say. There. But anyway, it's okay to laugh. I get 2 laugh tracks out of you guys, right? You guys ever try to sit underwater for 18 minutes? It's all right. That's the thing. We're twisting it around, okay? Go back. Yeah. Yeah, okay. Yeah, she's like, how many years for you? Yeah. So, but you learn You learn to love not by studying the person that you love, but by understanding yourself. That's what genuine love is. That's unhypocritical love. Because last week I talked about the difference between being and doing. Right? When Jesus says the parable, he says, many will come to me in that day and they'll say, Lord, Lord, have we not prophesied in your name? Have we not done all these things in your name? And I'll say, depart from you, because I never knew you. And in the second group, he turns to and he says, come, good and faithful servant. Or he says, I'm sorry, backpedal a little bit. Backpedal a little bit. He says, and then you never. Why? Why? Because we did all these things. And then Jesus tells him, he says, well, I was naked and you didn't clothe me. I went to prison and you didn't come visit me. I was hungry and you didn't feed me. I was thirsty and you didn't give me water. And then the second group, he says, you come in. And they're shocked. They're surprised. And they said, well, why do we come in? When did we give you water? When did we clothe you? When did we come visit you in prison? When did we do those things for you, Jesus? And he says, when you did them for the least, you did them for me. But the difference between those two groups, the sheep and the goats, which I'm still learning about, the difference between those two groups is that one group sets out the idea that they've already done something. And the other group was, and they didn't even realize what they had done because they didn't have to brag about it. Who would have to brag about the person that they are? And it brings me to modern society. Think about people nowadays. I mean, you see people walking around with blue hair and the loud shirts, and they have to be as loud as possible. But you actually have a conversation with them, they don't have anything to say. Because what identity have they taken on? They've taken on an identity that's outside of themselves. They become actors in their own life. They're living a story that's not theirs because they want to be the person that they can never be because they hate the person who they are. Now, I know I threw a lot out there, but it's the truth. That's the world that we live in. Now, the one who gives, give with what? Joy. Why? Because you realizing who you are and being able to give, knowing the potential of what that person may become, will bring you joy. See, I had lost my joy for a long time, and I forgot. I love to garden, okay? And when I say I love to garden, I mean it with the sense of I've learned more about who I am through gardening than I have anything else. Well, not anything else. There's a whole library full of books of stuff that I don't know still. But when you're gardening, I couldn't figure it out. Why was I drawn to this? Why was I drawn to it? You plant the seeds and then they grow and they make fruit. And I was like, well, maybe it's the harvest, but it's not the harvest. I don't love the harvest. Come on. It's so much work. You guys ever go out there and try to cut down green beans, or black beans or any kind of beans, You got to pull the whole root out and then you got to strip all the beans off the vine and then you got to separate out all the stuff. I don't love that. If I'm honest with myself, I don't love that. It's not looking at the abundance that I love. It's not looking at the abundance that I love. It's watching potential become actualized. That's the heart of a teacher. You guys know that? Where you can take somebody who knows nothing about anything. You can say, you know what? You are going to be somebody. And I am not going to give up on you. And I'm willing to sacrifice everything that I am to make you into the person you're supposed to be. It's like God grabs every one of us by the collar, doesn't he? There's just some people, like my goats, who just don't want to be grabbed. They're like, I'm fine just the way I am. I got this identity from someone else. I became the person I wanted to be instead of the one who I was made to be. And because I did that, I never realized how awesome I could be. So you get stuck in the doing and you get lost in the not knowing because you lose your own identity. Realizing the potential of the people around you is one of the greatest things, person. That's how you find your meaning and purpose in life. So when he says this, love one another with brotherly affection. Now, who has brothers? Okay, good. Good. You're going to get this more than other people. Now, when you were growing up with your brother, he says, what's really interesting here is Paul uses two words for love in the same sentence, and he contrasts them against each other. And he's about to give a big contrasting statement after this. And I'm so running out of time, I'm going to have to talk fast. If you guys get lost, just ask me questions afterwards, all right? So he says, love one another with brotherly affection. So, brothers, okay, I have a younger brother. I'm the older brother. And if you ask my younger brother, I was totally mean to him all the time. If you asked him back then, I was totally mean to him all the time. Why? Because I'd say stuff like, dude, you're better than that. What are you doing? What's wrong with you? You know whose family you're part of? You know that your name goes out everywhere? Anytime someone says something about you, that reflects on me, right? Okay? That's brotherly love. I love my brother, right? He's not me, and we fight. And Proverbs says a brother is meant for adversity. I heard somebody say it. Who said it? A brother's meant for adversity, right? Because we do. I mean, we go to Bible studies sometimes, and we have some arguments, don't we? Well, I mean, but it's all right. It's all right to have arguments because one sharpens the other. Iron always sharpens iron, right? If my belief or whatever I feel is not strong enough to hold up to the test of my brothers, and guess what I need to do with my belief? Throw it away, right? Because iron sharpens iron. God puts the people in our lives to help develop us into the people we're supposed to be. Not to just sit there and be like, you know what, that's the person I'm supposed to be. No, the people around you are the ones who are transforming you into the person you need to be. That's why it's so important to surround yourself with people who only want the best for you. And what do our teenage kids do? Well, I mean, I've had this discussion until I was blue in the face. What do teenagers do? They go and hang out with people because they think that they're cool. Why do they do that? Because they want a different identity. Because they are insecure about who they are. They're trying to find who they are in the world. And because of us as parents not reinforcing that identity, guess what? They'll find it. And you're not going to like it. Because they're going to surround themselves with people who don't want the best for them. Because if we know one thing about people, it's that they take. They want to get everybody moving in their direction, and they don't want to turn and serve others. Because that's the lowliest position. It's the one who's holding up the pyramid. That guy is the loser. That's not true, though. Because God's the one who's holding up all of human society. And he's the one who's the winner. I mean, there's an empty tomb that proves it. So, here it is. Godly love. Let your brotherly affection lead you toward godly love. How about if I said that way? Does that make sense? You guys with me? Let your brotherly affection lead you to the sacrificial love, the person you're supposed to be. Amen? Because, I mean, Greek is read right to left, but Paul is a left to right writer. And sometimes you look at his stuff and you go, well, that could be interchangeable. I'm not mixing up his words. It's the same words, but it says, love each other with brotherly affection. But when I say agape, and you realize what agape means, does any one of us live up to that? I mean, I come close with my wife. What was there that I wouldn't do for her or my children? I come close. I'm willing to go work 65 hours a week, literally break my fingernails off, work my fingers to the bone, sacrificing everything I thought I was to become the person that I'm meant to be. Is that about? It's about them, but it's also about me. See, there can be a win-win in the situation. It's the most selfish act I can think of, being self-sacrificing. And if that confuses you, then we need to talk about the cross again. Because how is it that we're all here today? I mean, you think about it. Really, spend some time thinking about it. It wasn't because we dyed our hair the right color, or we wore the right fingernail polish, or we put on the right clothes, was it? I'm pretty sure when God came to me, I was at the lowest status I could be in life. I was working 2 jobs and trying to figure out how to feed my kids off of. Never mind. I'm not going to air that on YouTube. But the lowest place I could be, that's where he found me. And that's incidentally the same place where he came into our world. The lowest place you could be. And our expectation was that some king would come riding in, right? Covered in gold. That was a Jewish expectation. Some king would come riding in covered in gold. Guess what? No. He got on a donkey and he rode into the city. And on the other side of town, you had Pontius Pilate riding in on a horse covered in gold. Now, who's the real king in that situation? I hope we're all Christians here. We accept that Jesus is the king of the universe. King of the universe. And how did he achieve that status? Well, we put him there because we were willing to take all of our hatred and our evil out on him. And that moves me to the next part. Outdo one another in showing honor. Now, I mean, he's already talked about how we shouldn't act like pretend. And you know that when somebody comes up to you and they're like, oh, I like your hair today. And you're like, come on, really, guys? I didn't even brush this. This just like happened, you know? They walk up to you and they're like, oh, I like your hair today. Are you being genuine, really? You know, you walk up to somebody and you say, hey, I know the person you could be, and you're not that person right now. Is that showing honor to somebody? Absolutely it is. Does it feel like it? You ever walk up to somebody and confront them like that? Like, I love my son. You guys should love your sons if you have sons. You should love them. And my daughter, I love them. When my daughter messes up, you think I hesitate for 1 second, like thinking that she's going to be angry at me when she messes up and I confront her about it. Do you think God treats us the same way? Think God confronts us about the stuff we've messed up on? If he loves us, he does. Maybe sometimes he puts you in the situation you did not want to be in to get your attention. Sometimes it takes a mountain, right? Because we, as the 3-pound brain creatures that we are, or is it 2 pounds? I'm probably a 2-pounder. Someone in here is probably a 3-pound brain. But as the creatures that we are with this little tiny head, we don't know the future from the end. And here we are, sitting, wandering around, trying to take on identities that aren't ours, trying to blame other people for the things that we should own up to. And we can't even judge what's right and what's wrong. We don't even know. I mean, I could just sit and eat butter pecan ice cream until I was as big as this room. I could do that. Would that be good for me? It depends on your perspective. But good and evil aren't relative to perspective. So he says, outdo one another in showing honor. Do not be slothful in zeal, be fervent in spirit. Serve the Lord, rejoice in hope. Okay, so what's really interesting here, it says, do not be slothful in zeal. You ever heard somebody be slothful in zeal? You ever heard somebody be like, you know what, there's a line out there, I'm using Proverbs as my grasp on slothfulness, right? There's a line out there, and I just don't want to go out there, but I'm zealous. I mean, that doesn't make sense, does it? It doesn't make sense. But so he's got to mean something else underneath it, right? And I'm still running out of time. I'm so long-winded here. But he's got to mean something else by it. Right? So he's going to use this word somewhere else. Be fervent in spirit. Contrast. Okay, Paul does this a lot, where he takes one thing and he says, don't be slothful in zeal. And everyone nods their head and they go, oh yeah, that makes complete perfect sense. And be fervent in spirit. Okay, do you guys pneuma? Pneuma is the Greek word. Sorry, I read too much Greek this morning. Pneuma? You guys know pneuma? Breath. Good. Good. Didn't have to do too many hand gestures. So, slothful in zeal. Well, how about this? How about we correlate the Greek word for compassion with zeal? Could that make sense? Compassion. Because you could say as a Christian, we're supposed to be zealous for God, right? We're supposed to be zealous for God. What's in God, his name is what? Well, Jesus is what we know him as. When he reveals himself to Moses, what's the first word God uses as his name? Elohim. Well, I mean, you can throw it that way. Maybe I'm fishing too much. I'm just going to give it to you. I'm running out of time. Compassionate, merciful, or graceful, slow to anger, abounding in steadfast love and truth, trustworthiness. So now think about that. Do not be slothful in compassion. Be fervent with your words. Now, if I'm compassionate, I'll try to end here because I get distracted easy. Now, if I'm compassionate and I love my daughter and I see her hanging out with the wrong kids and I say, you know what, she'll grow out of it. Is that compassion? No. If I confront my daughter and I say, these people are wrong for you because they don't have your best interest in mind. They want to just take from you. They want to just take from you. Then, am I being compassionate? Slow to anger, right? I'm working on that one right now. But it's another joke. You guys can laugh. Another joke. But rejoice, serve the Lord. Now, when he uses this term, I mean, he's thrown in all the key words here. He's thrown in all the key words. Compassion, mercy, grace. He hasn't thrown in slow to anger yet. But when you think about these, rejoice in hope, be patient in tribulation, be constant in prayer, contribute to the needs of the saints, and seek to show hospitality. Now, he's just rephrased everything that he already said. When he's talking about gifts that we have, he says, be patient in tribulation. Okay, now, does that not sound a lot like slow to anger? Who is he naming off here in these attributes that we're supposed to have? The great I am. That's what he's doing. He's contrasting, but he's throwing little breadcrumbs for all of us to follow back to where God reveals himself for the first time and who he truly is. Because we forget that. We think that zeal is supposed to be, oh yeah, I'm supposed to go around and hit people with a stick when they're doing stuff wrong. Paul already did that in his life, didn't he? How'd that work out for him? He got knocked off his horse. Right? But to be compassionate means that my aim, my ultimate aim underneath my motivation is to watch you grow. Just like the gardener, just like a good father does. Because when I ask myself the question, what's my main motivation for raising these children? It's in the word raising, isn't it? Because what am I doing? I'm taking people who have unlimited potential, right? Unlimited potential to be whatever. That's what we tell our kids all the time. Be whatever they want to be. I've still got like 4 minutes. I'm going to keep going. You guys still with me? All right, good. I take children and they have unlimited potential, but no direction. Where do they stay? Unlimited potential. And what do they become? Nothing. Might as well be vapor in the wind. But when I take a child and I say, look, you're good at painting, you're good at driving, we're going to work on that, we're going to focus, and you are going to be angry at me every step of the way because I'm going to push you to be the best that you can be at that and fulfill the person that you are. You know, football players that hurt their knees or get injured in football oftentimes say that that's the greatest thing that ever happened to them. Because you know, when you're fixated on one thing and you think that's the person you're supposed to be, then all of a sudden God flips the script on you. And now, instead of you getting everybody to go your direction, you've turned to where you can serve those people. It's the funniest thing, and it's the most fulfilling thing in life. You only have two stories. There's only two stories. And this is Greek too. And I'll end on this. Try to land the plane right here. You have a comedy and you have a tragedy. That's it. In the comedy, the hero survives. In the tragedy, the hero dies. Which story are you living? Because in the comedy, if you remember, I told you guys, I'm not giving it away to everybody. But in the comedy, the hero turns and does something. And that's how all the jokes work. Amen? So I'll just end with a word of prayer, and then we'll fellowship, right? I'll give you 2.5 minutes to fellowship, if the second hand is right. Heavenly Father, I thank you for gathering us